Good evening, everybody. Welcome. We're going to start the meeting now, call to order. It's 6:01 or so. We're going to start tonight with our budget presentation. So I'd like to turn this part of the meeting over to Deb Clark, our new business manager, new budget manager.
Hi, thank you for being here. Everyone can hear okay? I'm a little mic shy still. For starters, I just want to address the big question that on Tuesday, there's a couple of big votes that you have coming up. You've got a budget vote based on being part of the supervisory union, but you also have a big vote being asked whether you want to join and be part of the unified district, the Act 46. And I just want to start by saying, if there's a yes vote, the budget you will be voting on will move forward and be merged. So the budget you're voting on, whether you're as Cambridge Elementary School part of the supervisory union or Cambridge Elementary School part of the unified district, the new unified district, is your budget. It won't change based on unifying. And you'll also see through this budget that, let me make sure I can get this up. Oh, good. That as we move through the following information, how this budget continues to support Cambridge's high commitment to quality instruction, as evidenced at the end by the SBAC, the NECAP, and Fountas and Pinnell assessment performance. So one thing you'll see that's a little different this year, I'm breaking special education out for a couple reasons. Special education is now housed at the SU level. So all of the expenses and revenues are up at the SU, and then it's assessed out as a net expense. And it's causing an interesting dynamic to the budget expenditures. And we're seeing that statewide. The preliminary data that the state has received for budgets across, is showing the same impact. So we're focusing on, from an expense standpoint, the non-education or non-special education expenses. And we can see that this year, we're looking at, for 2018, $162,000 increase, or 3.57%. However, our total expenditures are expected to decrease by 4.86%. The key budget drivers from an object standpoint are these top two items, salaries and benefits, and then contracted services. Again, because of centralization at the SU level of transportation, a lot of the salaries are now being paid out of the SU and then assessed back after there's revenue applied against those expenses in transportation. So it sort of changes the dynamic. People who were in the salary line prior are now in the contracted service line as part of a bill back from the supervisory union. But overall, salary increases around 1% to 3%. And then there's also some increase in facilities and special projects this year in facilities. Excuse me, of almost 79,000. And a general increase, not the special ed supervisory union assessment, but a general 7.91% increase of general expenses from the supervisory union. Revenue, unfortunately, is changing in a different direction. Again, some of this, you can see the special ed seems to have dropped drastically. Again, you don't see it any longer at the local budget level. It's embedded in a net expense that is brought over from the SU. The non-special ed revenue is also decreasing, which is put for a total impact of about a 4.91% change or increase in the ed spending calculation. In 2018, the board is asking again to use some unreserved fund balance, the same amount that was used in 2017, the $35,877. Just quickly, transportation, because you won't see this detail any longer at this level. I've put together your salaries and benefits, repairs and maintenance, fuel, equipment. This budget is down by approximately 19% from prior years, and that is more of a budget correction from 2016 that seems to have carried forward, primarily in salaries and wages. This is just sort of your revenues broken out in a nice little pie chart, but it's the same information that you have in the other revenue spreadsheet. This pie chart, the expenditures pie chart, I like because it really is emphasizing, let's see if I can use this here. I don't know if I can make that work. It's emphasizing the instruction and how important it is. Between instruction, student support services, enrichment, we're seeing a total more, we're seeing increases over last year. Last year's enrichment percentage of budget was 1.67. Last year's student support percent of budget was, well, 6.9, that one's a little down, but it's about the same. The instruction last year was 37.2 compared to 41.71. There's also some initiatives in network services this year to start replacing Chromebooks and upgrading some software in the classrooms, as well as the facilities. Ground floor windows. Budget growth over the last 8 years, 8 years, has about 16.02% since 2011. However, averaging that out is about 2.9% per year, which is very reasonable and conservative. The estimated 2018 tax rates before taking into consideration income sensitivity. The ed spending at the elementary level for Cambridge is $4.9 million, with equalized pupils of about 332. Per equalized pupil spending at the elementary level, $14,008. The elementary homestead rate is estimated to be 1.468. However, Cambridge realizes some of the tax benefit of the Act 46 8-cent incentive for being as a member of the middle and high school union school. Once that's blended, the homestead rate after the elementary budget is combined with a secondary budget is down to 1.4716. We apply the common level of assessment, and the estimated tax rate is 1.423, slightly lower than the current year tax rate of 1.436, or about $13 savings on a $100,000 value of property. Now the big question, if Cambridge joins, we know Waterville has said yes, and they're in their reconsideration period. So if Cambridge joins and Waterville joins the unified district, we'd be looking at a combined educational spending budget of $27,800,000. That's both elementary and secondary. Combined equalized pupils of 1,793. Per equalized pupil spending of 15,005. A homestead rate before common level of appraisal, but after the full 8-cent incentive on all budget levels of 1.459. We apply the different common level of appraisals. And Cambridge's estimated rate would go down to 1.411, or about a $25 savings on a $100,000 property value. The enrollment history is showing there was some steady growth up through 2013. It fell off a little in 14, and it's looking to bounce back. It bounced back in 16. And we can see the projected 2018. It looks like we may hover in this 372, 362 range. But it's it's a reasonably steady graph at this point. So I think enrollment is holding steady. The 2016 results of the Fountas Pinnell Reading Assessment shows that at least 75% of most of the grades are achieving or exceeding the standards. The 2016 SBAC scores comparative are showing, oh, thank you. Actually, I gotta see my note though. Are showing that students continue to perform well among their peers in the supervisory union and across the state. The SBAC also is showing that the students are continuing to meet or exceed standards. Yeah, it's hard to do. And then the kneecap scores were making a great climb through 2015, and there was a little dip in 16. But the school continues to perform quite well. And the science scores comparatively, again, across their peers, the students are performing quite well across the SU and the state. And I thank you for your time, and please vote on March 7th.
Thank you, Deb. Does anybody have any questions budget-wise? Any questions about the presentation you just saw? Go ahead.
I have a quick question. So about the tax rate, I have a special note that.
Yeah, right behind you is a microphone for you.
No problem. Quick question about the estimated tax rate for 2018, because you mentioned in there that there's a 0.8 incentive. How long, have you guys looked at the budget, what that's going to look like once? Because if we do vote, we merge, I understand the incentive, there's a timeline, but eventually that incentive runs out. What would the tax rate look like after that? I guess, have you got any projections of what that'll look like once the incentive is no longer applicable?
So Maryland, with her Act 46, has done that on the homestead level.
Thank you.
And you're right, it goes 8 in 2018, 6 cents in 2019, 4 cents, and then 2 cents.
Thank you.
And Maryland will be here at 7 for the Act 46.
I think, isn't that the blended right there? That's the blended rate?
Yes, this is everything before CLA.
Oh, for,
This is the homestead
yeah,
blended
okay,
rate.
sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, if you have, do you have one of the presentation
Advance one
slides?
more
Or can we go
page.
back to, oh, what slide is that? It's the one that has all the towns in it. No, it doesn't. Oh, too fast. Next one, I think it is. So the second column over does show that's essentially the blended rate, tax rate. You would have a single blended rate across all the districts. Marilyn will talk more about this, but that would be next year's, and that's with 8 cents applied to it. So you can get, there would be 150.
Right, that's with the 8 cents applied at the elementary and secondary level. Everybody's one budget. Each campus then, or each town has the homestead rate of 1.459, and then each town's individual level of appraisal is applied to that to get the tax rate.
Do we have any other questions? Budget questions, go ahead.
One on the transportation situation, since the state in its infinite wisdom had decreed that this is centralized function, not realizing that SUs can't own any real property to put the buses on, but anyway. How are we able to successfully maintain the Cambridge buses here and still comply with at least a letter of the mandate from the state to preserve the local Cambridge busing.
Act 156, as far as just centralization of transportation?
Yeah.
I think it's still, the buses remain property of Cambridge School District. That doesn't change.
Remain
That-
managed by the Cambridge
It managed by-
School.
So I just changed the
Cambridge, it's-
contracting a little bit, but okay.
Yeah.
And that doesn't seem to be in jeopardy?
No.
No, we haven't heard anything about that.
And another quick question on special ed, if nobody else is waiting in line here.
Sure.
Again, when that was ostensibly centralized, but Lamoille North elected not to centralize the paras, just the professionals on that. So in the chargebacks and everything here, I'm assuming that the professional staff isn't apportioned to the individual schools on the basis of how much they use, but,
So the special ed budget overall
yeah.
is based on service plans that are developed at the school level, with a centralized director of student services. So each school's needs are addressed, but then they're either combined this year or 18 right now. Cambridge is kind of sits separate, but it's all housed at the SU, except for the paras. So
Yeah.
the salary and benefits for paras still remain at the local level.
Yeah, but are the individual schools being charged back on the professional time to what they actually use?
No,
Or
no,
okay,
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
No, it's now blended in a special
Right, okay.
education SU assessment
which was the intent, yeah.
based on population, student enrollment. So it changes that calculation and that expense dynamic significantly, which is a reason why we want to keep it separate, so it doesn't cloud the work done on those more controllable expenditures.
Will there be any effort to centralize the para expenses as well? Or at least bring it up again? I know the board rejected it, but,
Every year it'll come up.
Yeah,
yeah.
I wasn't here when the first conversation was
Right, I
had.
think every year it will come up.
Yeah,
And
right.
eventually, I think we'll be told that we need to do that.
Yeah, well, that's what they meant, yeah.
Any other questions?
Our cost per students, what does it compare to other districts around the area?
Do you have the actual numbers?
I do.
Yeah, maybe we could look at that. I do know we compare quite favorably into some of them. You know, we do have a good economy of scale that
Yes.
helps with the size of the school,
Yes.
drives that number down. You have the,
So, you know what, I have the modified unified union district, elementary level cost per student is $15,196. Once Waterville is rolled in, it's estimated to be $15,644. The threshold this year is $17,386. The threshold the state has said that they don't want you to go above. So we're well below that. And the number of students does help with the economy of scale.
Thank you.
yes, over here.
Why is the spending $1,000 more if we join the non-union
So
The spending,
the spending is higher on the second one that you're looking at because you're combining with the high school now. It's not just the elementary, it's the high school expenditures. And there's also the economies of scale that then blend in. So it's going up because of the high school. So Cambridge on its own with the high school, make sure I'm looking at the right one. So once Cambridge's, sorry, I need my glasses. 14,000 is blended with the high school, it goes up to a combined student spending of 15,425. Just Cambridge with the unified, the middle and high school budget combined. So the 14,000 that was showing before was just at the elementary level.
So those 360 some odd kids is $1,000 more to join the union now, the modified union.
No, no. So joining the modified union With the high school, the secondary education costs rolled in, it would be 15.5. Without joining the modified union, but with the secondary education costs rolled in combined, it would be 15.5. So 15,424 versus the 15,507. So it's the blending it with the high school. The other one you were looking at was just the elementary school expenditures. It hadn't included Cambridge's portion of the secondary expenditures.
So basically, it's the same $50.
Correct.
So I know it's really easy to discuss this kind of both scenarios, and we're crossing over a little bit into the Act 46 discussion. We probably ought to hold, if you have questions that are related to the what-ifs of the merger, and particularly it's hard with a budget because it's hard to separate some of this, but we might want to save them for 7 o'clock, that meeting, just in case we have more people joining us that would like to hear the same answers that you'll be asking the questions for. So if you have, maybe if we could focus on, the budget as it stands alone for Cambridge. Questions about that? Yes.
Thank you. So as I understood it, you had mentioned that we had seen a downgrade, I guess, in the amount of revenue that we were receiving from the state education fund. Am I understanding that correctly?
From various sources that aren't tax derived.
Okay. So in addition, I guess to make up the difference in that, would that be something that the town itself would have to vote on, I guess, potentially an increase to the budget to make up the shortfall that we're not getting from the state, or am I understanding that correctly?
So the budget you vote on is your expenditures. You're voting on what it costs to run the school, the expenses it takes to run the school. The revenue is then used to calculate what the estimated tax rate will be and how much is actually needed to be raised through tax revenue in order to make sure the school ends up with.
To make up the difference in between the fact that we're not getting money from the
Correct.
state.
But we're
Okay.
not increasing expenses where it changes your tax rate.
Right.
However, even with the decreased revenues, with the assistance of the incentive, even at just the secondary level, the changes in the amounts that impact the calculation from the state, the CLA, and the yield, Cambridge's tax rate is dropping a little bit. That's your $13 per 100,000. So you're actually kind of holding level.
Okay. So there isn't a significant increase then to the Cambridge budget, at least for this year?
Not your tax rate.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Should ask if anyone isn't here for the next one.
Can take a question.
Oh, to see people aren't here.
We're just taking the answer to everybody.
Yep. So, actually, Kat had a great idea. Is there anybody here who's not going to be able to stay for the second part of the meeting who would like a question that we could touch on the Act 46 side of things?
Or we can take the
I
question
guess, or we
and
can
ask
or
it.
take it. I guess how we would take it, and we could ask it later on, or we could, address it now. Or do we have any other questions about where we're spending your money? Okay. Since the Act 46 meeting is warned for 7 o'clock, we will start that then. Usually it goes a little longer, the budget does, the budget talk does.
Sorry.
Well, I could talk about some things.
Do you want to talk? Probably could.
I could talk about our education quality standards.
Okay, yeah, so why don't, we'll spend a little time with Kat. Kat Gallagher is our superintendent.
Thank
And
you.
turn over to her. Thank you, Deb.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to give more of a background around Act 46 and where we are and what's happening with the legislature at 7. But I did want to talk to you a little bit about education quality standards that will mandate that we look at student growth and assessment in a different way. So in the past, we've had kneecaps, we have SBAC. Kneecaps are essentially going away by the wayside. The Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium, which is fondly known as SBAC, is relatively new for us. And it is going to be just one of the assessments used for students going forward. And it's good news, bad news. It means sort of a change in mindset and a change in the way we frame learning and how we assess that learning. But it also gives some of our students who don't learn in traditional ways multiple ways of showing how they learn and showing what they learn and how they meet proficiencies. So the SBAC will still remain one of the measures. There will be a student portfolio measure, so that will be based on students' personal learning plans or their passion, what they're interested in pursuing, and they'll have to do a hands-on project related to that in order to graduate. We will have student choice measure. We will have physical education and perhaps an art measure. And this allows for our students to really show their learning rather than a teacher-directed sort of assessment. That component will always be there, but it's being added to. So when you see Cambridge's results, student results in the next year or two, you will likely see many more measures being assessed. But that's all I wanted to say about education quality standards for now. Thank you.
So before we go any further, I actually we'll introduce the Cambridge board here, just also so you know who is up here. I'm Mark Stebbins.
I'm Bernard Barnes.
I'm Heather Hobart, and I have a fourth grader and a first grader here.
I'm Jan Sander.
I am not on the board. I'm Mary Anderson. I'm the principal.
And Donna Griffith
wanna
is our lovely.
Donna, yes, Griffith is taking our
Hey,
minutes
Mark.
over there.
Why don't you mention Laura, too?
Yeah, we also have a fifth board member, Laura Miller, who is away today, so she wasn't able to join us. What's that? Yeah. Do you want to recess until?
Yeah.
Okay, I think we will probably have a recess until 7 o'clock. I apologize for the delay, but we many times go longer than this with the budget. So we'll have a recess and convene again at 7 o'clock to begin the Act 46 discussion. Thank you. 6:30. Do you want to clear? I know.
Let's play mat ball.
Do you?
Standing over it, yeah.
We have- You don't? You need to step on. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to reconvene our meeting tonight. Before we get started, one quick thing for people who are just joining us. Let's introduce the board quick. I am Mark Stebbins. I am the chair.
Bernard Barnes.
Jan Sander. Donna Griffiths, I'm the minute taker.
And Heather Hobart is right back there. She's also on the board. And Laura Miller is also on the board, and she is out of town, so she's not here tonight. I just want to give you a quick rundown of how we want to proceed with the Act 46 portion of our meeting. Catherine Gallagher is going to make a few comments to start, and then we're going to have a presentation by, I think Marilyn's going to do a presentation. There she is. She's our Act 46 consultant. And after that, we'll have a period of question and answers, and we'll take them both here. And I think we are set up so we'll see if we can get some from people who are watching online as well. We'd like to try to keep the questions to questions, I guess, and see if we can just move through them quickly and get as much information out as we can. So that being said, thank you all for coming tonight, and I will turn this over to Kat.
Thank you, Mark. I also want to recognize again Mary Anderson, our wonderful instructional leader. Thank you for coming tonight. I will be here for the first half of the meeting, and then I need to leave, but I will turn the meeting over to Marilyn Frederick, our Act 46 consultant and former business manager extraordinaire. So we meet again. I did not have the pleasure of being with all of you for the first Act 46 vote and public information session. And a lot has happened in the last year. I think if we go back to April 12, 2016, there were many meetings, many questions, many things that nobody was able to anticipate. And in fact, one of the things I wanted to share with you is what's happening in our House and Senate committees. Dave Sharp and Phil Baruth talked about the genesis of Act 46, and this act was intended to merge larger districts and to increase efficiencies and to increase opportunities for our students. However, there were some unintended consequences, and although what has happened in my mind for our supervisory union has been wonderful, and I'll share a little bit how we're working together in different ways. It was heartening for me to hear our senators talk about the fact that they didn't anticipate that we would have had some problems, and we've seen this all over the state. One district can't necessarily be compared to another district. It's not an apples-to-apples comparison. So there are some that have made this merger quite successful. Others have opted out of study committees. Others are in study committees now. Some have revoted, and some are coming up with new votes. So in the case of our own Waterville, some like to call it a revote, but by law, a revote only can occur 30 days after an initial vote. So this was a new vote for them. And the margin was huge, 126 yes votes to 58 no votes. So not only did they have a record number of voters, but the margin was quite huge. And for them, I think the issue was communities and preserving the relationships in two of their communities, Waterville and Belvedere. At least that was part of it. For Cambridge, I'm not sure what the impetus is, and it's not my role to tell you that I think you should vote yes or no. It's my job to make sure that you have the information you need to make the most informed decision possible on town meeting day. So There are people who have thought that Act 46 would be repealed and said this steadfastly 2 years ago. Not only has that not happened, but we have district upon district voting. And in fact, 57 to 59 towns are voting for the first time on town meeting day. There have been bills sent through the House and the Senate, and most of them have quote, died in the water. And in fact, Dave Sharp says that if there are any significant changes to Act 46, they will be between, quote, nothing and a tweak. There is one bill out there that I think has some traction, and it is specifically for those people involved in study committees currently, and it has to do with alternative structures. They are looking at geographically isolated schools and districts who can't quite make any forward momentum in their study committees. This is what this bill is intended to do. So there has been a lot of rhetoric about, well, you know, let's just get an extension. Let's just see what we can do about this. This is not applicable from what we know today to Cambridge. So I think my hope is that we refer to all of our students as all of our students. Vermont is our state. The towns are our towns. Our students are our students. And I referenced this at the Waterville information meeting. In 2015, the Lamoille Union baseball team won the state finals, and they were recognized at the State House. Nobody asked them their town of origin. They were Lamoille Union students. Our students have been together from all our feeder towns in grades 7 through 12 for quite a while. And I was just having a lovely conversation with a woman who lived through that first merger. So I guess I would ask that you consider robust opportunities for all of our students. And I mentioned earlier that we're already seeing some advantages to working together in different ways. An Eden board chair, well, actually, he's not the Eden board chair, but he has been the Eden board chair in the past and is the board chair for the Modified Union and for the Lamoille Union school boards. David Whitcomb found a school for our Hyde Park students to attend while their building is being relocated. I don't know that we would have had the same opportunity to have his input before now. We have students interested in Hyde Park's eco program on Wednesdays, big science or outdoor learning program, and they may have access to that as part of the Modified Unified Union. So a lot of questions, I think, we are seeking questions from you, and we have our Marilyn and Deb, who is circulating, to help answer some of those. And I guess I would just leave you with this. Every one of our schools has had students in the Honor Society. Every one of our schools has graduated a valedictorian. Every one of our schools has had students mentoring in student council, in leadership programs, in world languages, every one of them. So I urge you, when you vote on town meeting day, to think about our children and what might be best for them going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Kat. Marilyn, I'm going to turn this right over to you then, and you can begin your presentation.
Okay, good evening. Hopefully everyone can see the slides. I know it's a little dark. This happens to be my favorite picture of our mountain, and it is taken from Cambridge. It's the alpine view of Mount Mansfield, and I love it. So I put it up here, but I've used it for more than Cambridge's meeting, but you know, that's the best view. Anyway, guiding principles behind Act 46. When we first started this was certainly a unified union school district must lead to greater equity. So it wasn't all about the money. People were looking at what were the educational and philosophical guidelines that we needed to put forth if we were going to really consider Act 46 as something we could go forward with. And what I'm referring to is the original committee that was formed to look at whether or not Act 46 was viable and practical for the Lamoille Union member towns. It has to lead to increased learning opportunities, better outcomes, and enhanced experience with access for all our students. And I think you just heard Kat talk about some of the opportunities that they are seeing reveal themselves even now, whether that is a cooperation of board member from a different town helping another town, or if it's a program like the ECHO program at one school, now possibly being open to some of the other schools that we serve. Unified Union School District must make education more affordable today and into the future. So of course there was a financial aspect to it, as one would think. And then towns must have equitable representation, participation, and voice. Equitable isn't equal. It's done on a proportional basis, but it's equitable. Cambridge, in this new board, would actually have, I believe, 5 seats of the total seats. So it's based on your total population. The process to date, I mentioned the Act 46 committee that met for about 9 months to a year prior to really putting forward their recommendation. The meetings were open to the public. They talked about what sort of opportunities and challenges would this create for our member districts. They explored cost savings. They engaged in community outreach. There were 6 public forums and informational meetings done in each of the towns. Not 6 in each town, but basically we made sure that we visited each town to give the meetings. The committee agreed that single governance structure did meet the objectives. So they laid out what were the objectives that they needed to see, and they agreed that those objectives could be met in a single governance structure. They drafted the Articles of Agreement that are basically the bylaws that our new Unified Union School District lives by. And then on April 2016, we had simultaneously all 6 towns voted. 4 towns voted to form the new unified district, with Waterville and Cambridge voting no. And since that time, as Kat mentioned, Waterville has voted yes to join. And you folks have a vote coming up this Tuesday. We've had the opportunity now to build that first budget for the Unified Union School District. So a lot of the things that were unknowns before, and I know a lot of people felt like there's no way this is going to save money. That's not true, tried and true. Now that we've had the opportunity to build the new budget for next year, this is some of the things that they found. Definitely, as Kat mentioned, the mindset has changed from my students to our students. That's an important aspect, and one that I really felt would happen quickly in our community, and it has. Elementary budgets were reduced by over 5%, 5.44% reduction in the elementary collective budgets. Middle school and high school budgets were decreased by almost 12%, 11.84%. Tax rates are projected to decrease. Tech Center GMTCC budget was reduced by 1.07%. They've discussed the sharing of an elementary literacy and math coach that's in the budget. They're looking at and discussing common curriculum approaches like the Bridges math program, Reader's Workshop, and vertical teaming opportunities. They are beginning discussions with future opportunities in elementary foreign language, something that in the 10 years I was business manager, we never really talked about. There wasn't a possibility in my mind in the budget process that we ever were talking about elementary foreign languages other than a pipe dream. It was never something that really got a dollar amount really set in any of the budgets while I was here. Now they're actually looking at opportunities of sharing teachers to make that happen. So those educational opportunities that they first talked about was more than just a discussion. They truly are believing that would come true. And discussion around school-based advisory councils, because we realize that it's important to have a community's voice, individual town voices too in this, and so individual school voices. And so they're trying to talk about a way that we could set up councils that would have input to the larger board. What we found in FY18, in terms of proposed budget percent changes and impacts, you can see in just prior to this was Cambridge's budget informational meeting for your vote. You know that overall your budget's going down, but in terms of what's driving that budget downward, obviously the majority is special ed changes now that we've consolidated special ed into the union. That's at a 33.97% decrease. But in non-special ed, you actually have an increase of 3.57% in those areas that aren't special ed. Because the reality is it's harder, you know, special ed is not something as controllable as non-special ed. In the mused elementary budget, there's an increase of less than 0.5%. So when you're looking at any budget that can decrease by that amount when you're, or not decrease, but just increase by that small amount, when you know that you've got obligations for contracts and salaries, et cetera, that is telling me, as a business manager, that they are realizing some savings as it relates to the unification of the elementary schools in an area that you really can control, and that's the regular ed, non-special ed piece. The challenges to Act 46, I think Kat talked about those too. Loss of local control and fear of the unknown. We've had a challenge of that perception. I haven't necessarily seen that play out, and what's interesting to me is I'm seeing what's playing out is what Kat described, where people from other towns are taking an interest in other member towns and helping them out, which is interesting. It's almost an expansion of local control. Teaching and learning, reluctance in switching to unfamiliar curriculum. Teacher mobility may cause anxiety. Job uncertainty definitely causes anxiety. And I think we've seen that in a member district that they had, well, Waterville had voted not to join at first. That put a lot of anxiety on the individuals that were employed there. And we have lost some good people before they voted to join the union. So when you have the job anxiety of people that were looking towards losing their jobs because they weren't part of the union, that caused a great deal of anxiety. Operational challenges, loss of local board's identity, greater control to the MUSE and to the state, and real estate ownership and indebtedness are some of the things that certainly caused a lot of discussion in all our towns. Last time we were here, we talked about the accelerated incentives, and now we no longer qualify for the accelerated incentives, the 10 cents and 8 cents, et cetera. But we do still qualify for what's called the conventional transition incentives. And that is if a vote of the electorate takes place by April of 2017, which will happen in Cambridge's case and has happened in Waterville's case. And if we are a single district by July 1st of 2017, then we can still take advantage of what is the conventional transitional incentives from Act 46, which the first one, of course, is the homestead tax rate reduction of 8 cents, 6 cents, 4 cents, and 2 cents. That plays out a little differently in Cambridge, and I'll show that in an upcoming slide. The small school grant retention, even though Cambridge does not get a small school grant, Cambridge is too large for a small school grant. It does affect some of our member towns. Waterville and Eden will get to retain those grants because of a yes vote. And that helps to reduce our overall education spending, helps to lower our tax rate. There's a hold harmless, 3.5% hold harmless. This is primarily in cases of the loss of students. That is a protection against great drops in student enrollment, because we all know in creating the tax rate calculation, it's very important what your denominator of equalized pupils are. So that, whatever your education spending is, divided by the number of equalized pupils, plays into what your tax rate is. So the bigger that equalized pupil number is, the lower your tax rate. For school districts that are losing students, there's a protection that allows you not to have to lose more than 3.5% students. Maybe you have a loss of 10% in a given year, but you're guaranteed to have a soft landing rather than the drastic tax rate swings that the hold harmless, if not there, would provide. Without a vote on Act 46, a positive vote, this is due to sunset. So this keeps us in protection. And income sensitivity, and this is one thing that I didn't speak enough about, I think, last time, is while we keep on talking about the tax rate, 2/3 of everyone in Vermont get some sort of income sensitivity and pay their taxes based on that. And the same transition incentives that occur with the tax rate have an impact on what the people who pay by income sensitivity pay. So a yes vote helps those people. 2/3 of the people that vote based on their income, it actually helps to lower their tax also. So what happens in Cambridge? Yes versus no vote. And this is basically your homestead tax rate before the common level of appraisal is applied to it. Because a common level of appraisal, Cambridge's is over 100%. It's 1.03 something else, 1.0342 or something like that. So it has the effect, anything over 100% lowers the tax rate. Anything under increases the tax rate. So in this case, just to show what would happen with and without Act 46, the red is a no vote. So, you know, you're at 1.424 in FY17. Your homestead tax rate actually goes up on your projected budget, but because of your CLA, it reduces your property tax rate. And I know that's a tough one, but remember, your CLA is higher than 100%, so it's going to lower your tax rate. So, but the Act 46 application of incentives is based on, it takes off on your homestead tax rate before CLA. So a yes vote actually drops your taxes a little bit the first year. And then the goal, as you figure this out across all towns, by the end of the incentives, the idea is that all the towns match up to a certain tax rate. In our case, if you're using this particular budget, that tax rate, if I blend all the member towns together, is roughly 1.46 or 1.459. And so by the end of the incentives, that is how you do the projection, is you try and get all the towns to meet up. So at the end of incentives, all the towns have the exact same homestead tax rate. That's how it's going to work. In Cambridge's case, you already have a relatively low tax rate. So you don't automatically get an 8-cent reduction off your current tax rate. It's a blend with all the other member towns, but you still come out better than if you didn't have a positive vote. This one, as it relates, this is projected property tax bill rate, so this is after the CLA is applied, what you'll actually see on your tax bill, and you can see what it does there. 1.436 to 1.411, 1.39, 1.394. A no vote would give you 1.423 tax rate. A yes vote, 1.411. So even though it's not an 8-cent reduction, because remember, we're blending all the member towns, et cetera, you don't actually get that 8 cents. It is a reduction. And beyond that, with income sensitivity, the same type of thing happens. You get an application there through an equation that gives you a little better percentage. It's not a ton, but it is something. What that would do on the tax bills, projected, that's your current rate. If you had a $100,000 home, currently the school tax bill portion would be $1,436. We know with your budget that was built just for Cambridge Elementary School, it is projected to go down. And so you would still have a savings of, a no vote would give you a savings of $13 on a $100,000 home, 20 on 150, et cetera, et cetera. And if your home doesn't exactly match up with those that I've given a projection on, just add a couple of them together. So it could, if you have a $500,000 assessed home, you can add the $400,000 to the $100,000 and give you an idea of what the benefit would be. A yes vote, the change would give you more of a tax deduction on your property bill. So a $100,000 home, the savings would be $25, $200,000 home, $50, and the $400,000 home, $100 on your tax bill. I know one of the questions for Cambridge was on the bonded debt. And so we've included this slide here because there was always a question of if Cambridge were to want to buy out of the Union High School, for example, or if nothing occurs and ultimately the state possibly would place you with another district or something, what would the obligation be of Cambridge to buy out of the Union High School bonded debt? So we did, this is projected only because we couldn't even find really a place in the state of Vermont that this has happened to. So they recommended one method of doing this is based on enrollment. Your secondary enrollment, what would the percentage of the existing bonded debt be if Cambridge did want to buy out? And you could see that total estimated balance for June 30th, 2018 on the principal would be $6,237,000. And then Cambridge's portion of that, based on the percentage of the students they have at the secondary level, would be $1,661,000. So that, there's been a number of questions around that, so I wanted to bring that up. Questions around school directors. I mentioned before that Cambridge would have 5 school directors on the board. You can see the breakdown of what that equitable representation is for the board. And you could see, because Cambridge is one of our largest school districts, that they carry, along with Johnson, 5 board members on representation. And that's about all the information that would be different in this particular informational meeting for on Act 46. And then I think we're going to entertain questions.
I have a mic here.
Marilyn, can you go back to the chart where you have the yes and the no? Keep going. No, the bar chart. Okay, right here. So $1.46.8 divided by 103% is it's $1.42.
Yeah, 1.411.
Yeah. So Well, I think we have no choice but to do this because the state will continue to clamp down on us. From a financial perspective, and not even getting into control, we still are better off in the next 6 years. We're still gonna be below where we're gonna peg for 1, 2, 3, 5 years. Am I missing something?
That's how I have calculated it too, yes.
Okay.
You would still be better. You don't save the huge amounts that some of the towns have. You know, some of our towns have much higher tax rates than you do, so they got the full 8 cents. You don't, but you're still better off. Absolutely right. Yes. Oh, you can wait till the microphone.
The people watching the stream can't hear you if it's not on the microphone.
So, 2 questions. If I understand it correctly, so I guess how would this impact the town's ability to vote on budgets on town meeting day? Would all the budgets on the school boards be voted on essentially at the supervisory union level without any input, I guess you could say, from town meetings? Am I understanding that correctly?
There's still an obligation for informational meetings for any sort of budget vote.
Right, but anything binding is done by that board now. It's no longer taken to each individual town on a, let's say if the board produces a budget for all the people in the supervisory union, each town doesn't have to vote to approve that budget, am I correct?
It's done very much like the Union High School vote would be right now. So you're very used to the Union High School vote. Each town does vote on that budget. And then those ballots are counted. And so each town definitely has an impact on whether or not a budget passes or not.
Okay, so it's done by proportion to the population of the town of that, inside of that supervisory union. If they vote yes or no on a particular budget, that's a binding vote on that, correct? The board doesn't turn around, though it's not the final say, doesn't rest with the board of what the budget's gonna be, is what I'm trying to get at.
Oh, it rests with the voters. The voters vote the budget, yes.
Okay, and the second thing would be, so I understand Cambridge, the town, right now owns the bricks and mortars of the building. So if we did vote to merge, again, if we wanted to hold, you know, I know that there's the other activities occur in the building when it's not being used as a school. But I know there used to be, at least there was, when I was a kid, Taekwondo classes and stuff that were held in here and some other things. You'd have to now get approval for that use, if I'm not mistaken, from the board level, not the town. Am I correct?
The school district owns the bricks and mortars of the town, and that asset would go to the new district. But in our articles of agreement, they indicate, because that was a concern of every town, they indicate that the practices of that town for community use of their building would continue.
For how long?
Well, yes?
Like only because somebody asked me the same exact question just recently, I can speak to this a little bit. There is an article at, where it's 18 or something, but they, basically the policies of facility usage in all the towns, for all the schools, will remain as they are in each town. And to change that policy, that would be done at the large board level. And that can't be done within the first 5 years. So after 5 years, somebody could decide we want to change, no more Taekwondo in the gym, all right? Okay, so they want to throw that, they want to change a policy, or they want to create a unified policy that applies to all schools across the district. To accomplish that, the board needs a 75% vote, yes, to pass that. Out of 18 members of the board, Cambridge has 5. If those 5 stay together and don't like, there's some policy change that Cambridge doesn't like or Johnson doesn't like, those 2 towns actually have the power to prevent any policy change to that facility policy. So in theory, as long as Cambridge board members were all in agreement, the delegation from Cambridge could block this as long as we wanted to, and as could Johnson. So that's where, I mean, it's a more of a policy thing and not really they won't individually look at it and say, we're not going to have basketball anymore, or we're not going to allow, square dancing in the gym or something. These are all broad policy type of things, but.
Next, any other questions? Should have a little music going on while we wait for the microphone. But you wouldn't want me to do the singing, so.
What about the buses? Like Cambridge owns their own buses, but I believe elsewhere in the district they're contracted. How would that work?
Yeah, Eden owns their own buses and Cambridge owns their own buses. And even right now, we have to go out and bid every so many years to make sure that we have competitive bids for the use of the buses. And I'm not sure if you've gone over that at all in
Someone asked a question about the buses. The assets would stay with the campus, and right now there's no plans to change the way the buses are managed and the way the transportation is managed.
Yeah, Cambridge actually has a very strong bus system and management system of those buses. Kudos to Lisa. And Mary, of course.
But these buses aren't going to last forever. Exactly. What's going to happen after 5 years? When
So
these buses need to be replaced?
the question was, what's going to happen after 5 years when the buses need to be replaced? We actually replace buses all the time. You know, we do it on a rotational basis. And those decisions would go to the new board. But when you're looking at operational program, if it's going to ultimately be efficient and effective and the best for our kids, of course balancing also the monetary costs of it, and the busing system that we have used with Cambridge has been fiscally responsible. The new board would have to make those decisions. But certainly I've worked in single districts before that run their own buses, as well as districts that contract out. And doesn't matter what school it is or town that it comes from. They look at the overall benefit of the operations of a system. And that new board would then make the decision of how to replenish those buses, keep them up, et cetera. Want to give you this since it's...
Just a further comment on that, the transportation is already centralized by state decree, so that Cambridge really doesn't totally control things anyway, but Maryland and other folks at central office have managed to keep it properly in Cambridge here. And I'll also point out that there's no obligation for the high school, middle school, to use Cambridge buses to bring the kids up there, but they always have, because Cambridge has been able to come up lower or close to any other stuff. And you don't have to take the lowest bid if you can justify something that's a little higher. And the Cambridge buses were always in such great shape that it was never really a question at the high school level that we were going to keep the Cambridge buses. So I don't think that's going to be a deal breaker here at all.
There's a question here, and then there's one.
I would like to hear your ideas about how the Cambridge elementary school students would benefit from this. What are some ways? Could you give some examples?
Certainly, I think one of the biggest ones that I saw that I've been talking with the superintendent on is the opportunities around foreign language at an elementary level. I think that's pretty amazing because as I said, in the 10 years that I was building your budgets, that was never seriously considered that we would ever have foreign elementary language. That might be something that someone would say, wouldn't it be nice? But never have they actually sat down and said, you know, we've got a couple of teachers here in this school that would have some free time, some partial FTE time, that perhaps we can start thinking about providing foreign language at the elementary level. So they've actually got a conceptual idea of how to do that. That's much further along than we've ever gotten before in my tenure here. And the other thing that I started thinking of was music. might be something where you have the same sort of situation, where you have partial FTE someplace that has a particular skill or talent that could then broaden it around to the elementaries. Beyond that, the other curriculum things, I'm not the best person to talk about curriculum, but I was amazed when they started seriously talking about how could we put in foreign language at the elementaries.
There's funding in the 18 budget to start that.
Which, I'm telling you, that's great.
Hi. Cambridge has space use agreements in place with nonprofits, like the Cambridge After School Program, and I imagine other schools do around the region. I'm wondering what the plans would be for setting rates around use agreements if we were a modified district.
Setting rates, I think one of the things that the bylaws would still cover, if that's how you're using your facilities, community use type facilities in agreement, you'd still have that ability to do that. But in terms of setting rates, I would think that is something that the new board would have to decide on, because I can't tell you what the forces would be that would affect whether or not they could continue to do something, provide something at the same rate they were providing before. But certainly, every town had a concern about their community partners, the way they use their facilities, as well as their community at large. And that had very common interests among all members as it relates to being able to continue that practice the way they've been continuing it. And you heard how strong they felt about it based on that article in the bylaws. I'm not 100% sure of your particular situation. I don't know what your entity is, but I would think that if it is something that is a community use basis, and your community use of your facilities has to do with the rental of the building. So it sounds like if it is a community base where you do a certain fee for the use of your building, I would think it would apply. Yes.
If I understand correctly, Hyde Park is building a new school. If we all become one union, we help fitting the bill for that?
You do, but you also foot the bill for any building renovations in Burlington or any place else. I mean, and I mentioned this at the first informational meeting. Since 1997, since Act 60 actually took place, you've been helping other towns' budgets throughout the state of Vermont. It's no longer a scenario because no one town raises enough money on their education grand list to actually pay for the entirety of their school system. So I shouldn't say no, not one town does, because there's a few towns, the Stows of the world, the Manchesters of the world, those towns raise more money than they need for their school system. So they actually raise money and send the money out to all the other towns in essence. So if anything that happens, whether it's for buildings or for your educational system, it's no longer a scenario where it's only this town that supports it. It's really the entire 200 and whatever number, 57 number of towns in the state of Vermont that help to support it.
Marilyn, and there's other taxes around the state that are used for educational purposes in a general fund.
That's true. But it's really not the way that it's happened for a number of years now. Anytime that you vote, it's really a state tax. It's really money going down to theoretically going down to Montpelier and being sent out. So every individual supports every project throughout the state of Vermont. Any other questions? Oh, you got it?
I suspect that our school board members are probably much more versed in all of this than we are. So I wondered if you folks could, either as a group or individually, share your thoughts on what you're recommending, please.
Well, I can tell you that the board doesn't take an official position on this. Or we haven't, because we wanted to put the information out and let people digest it. And I know different people have different priorities. And, what yours may not be what someone else's might be. And so we want people to absorb the information, see what they thought. Because I could also give you my opinion and say this and this and this reasons I think it's good or bad. And they may not line up with anything that you find important. So I may not be of any help. So in that sense, we haven't taken really an official stance on anything. As far as personal opinions, does anybody want to share a personal opinion on this? Do you want to? I think it best if, I don't know, and the board might, hopefully would agree with me, try to get the facts out there on the whole thing. It's hard to give you opinions because our opinions might be tinted with some projections, various things that may or may not be relevant. I can give you some observations I've seen through this and that aren't an opinion one way or the other, just from my personal experience in the last few months. I have had the opportunity to be part of some discussions where, with folks down in Montpelier, and I can confirm what Kat had said earlier, that you probably heard in the news about the H-15 and the S-15 bills that were introduced, I think, last year, both of them right off to try to amend or change Act 46. The H-15 bill is pretty much set aside. The S-15, so this spring, the House committee is working on amending the preschool law, the Act now I can't remember, 146? 166, the preschool law, which needs work. So they're busy with that. In the meantime, the Senate is the one who's actually working on Act 46 this year. And it is true they are doing very little to it. And so what I've been told, the kinds of changes that are going to be done to it are, if you look at a district, say, and Kat touched on this, to our east and our west are two good examples of them. And there are actually a lot of districts like this on farther south and around the state. But you look to the east where we have Georgia, Fairfax, and Fletcher, are three different towns that have three completely different structures of how you have a K-6 town with school choice, then you have for high school, and then you have that sends its middle school kids to Fairfax. Then you have a town that's K-12, and then you have another town that's K-8 in their town with school choice for high school. And the three of them don't match up. And so they're having a very difficult time trying to create a single governance there and a single structure of how, when are we going to send kids? Are we all sending them to the BFA or, whatever? So that's a problem. Orleans Southwest, I think, is a similar issue because they have, Wolcott with school choice. And then they have two high schools, or I think it's just two, the Craftsbury and Hardwick that they have up to Hazen. And then there are other schools feeding into those, other smaller towns feeding those. So they're having same trouble too. So I think those districts are the ones, those situations are the ones that are going to be the only ones to see an easier path to creating some alternative structure That's what I've heard their focus is. And there's no, obviously no repeal coming. There's no delay to dates. This, one thing that came up was, are these dates going to be pushed out? Like if there's a deadline by this July, that you have to have tried to vote. Will they push that out? No, they're not going to push any of those out unless you have districts that are trying and failing miserably, and there are some who just don't see eye to eye. So there's some change to that potentially coming, but again, I think Kat might touch on it, is for districts, or Maryland might have. It's for districts that have tried and have a study group together. For towns that don't, or districts that don't, that just aren't doing anything, waiting and just hoping it goes away, they're going to get caught up a year from now in the Secretary of Education's report. She's going to make a report on what the overall state should look like, and what they'll do is they'll take a look at everybody, and maybe this is I'll segue in this a little bit, what would be next. Basically the two choices that kind of I've seen develop for Cambridge at this point. One obviously is yes, vote yes to join the Lemoyne North District. The second, if it's a no vote, is that Cambridge we'd be obligated to try to apply for an alternative structure ourselves, or do nothing. And doing nothing really isn't, I mean, we're just going to be told what to do if we do nothing. And for the alternative structure, there's a process that we'd have to go through applying for it by November, by the end of this November. And then next year, when we find out, the state the secretary would come out with her proposal as to what she thinks is Cambridge's proposal accepted or not? And if it is, it is. If it's not, then what happens to Cambridge? So then she'll put Cambridge into where she thinks it should go. And then as long as the State Board of Education is fine with that, then in July of 2019, whatever the hat is, wherever we're put in July of 2018, or told we're going to go, that becomes the norm in 2019. So, for example, if in July of 2018, if they said to us, it doesn't matter if you did nothing or alternate structure, whatever, you're just going to be part of Lemoyne North, then July 2019, we would become part of Lemoyne North. If they said you're going to become part of BFA, you're going to become part of BFA. The likelihood of them splitting up existing supervisory unions, I think, is very slim right now, from everybody I've talked to. I don't think that's, there isn't any real reason to believe that they would send us anywhere else but to Lemoyne North. Trying to think what else I've come across. But that's basically, I think that's kind of the roadmap I see as to what might happen. I personally see pros and cons to both approaches. But again, some of the pros and cons I might find more important than others. So I don't want to give any official, opinion of my own on that. But
I think that is something that a year ago when we did this, we didn't know as much about the alternate proposal possibilities as we do now. It's very clear now that if you're a district that fits in the preferred model, as Mark said, very unlikely that they would break up existing supervisory unions. So the alternate proposal was not something that was an option per se, as we thought maybe a year ago it was. It was, if you don't fit in any way, shape, or form in the preferred structure, then there's an alternate avenue that you can try and petition the state to see if it would work. What our Act 46 committee, when they did their study, it was very clear that the existing Lemoyne Nurse Supervisory Union structure lines up pretty well with the preferred circumstance, the preferred outline that the state was talking about. So I think Mark's right in saying that it would be very small, infinitesimal, small chance that they would break up an existing supervisory union at this point. And we didn't really understand that a year ago. as much as we understand that now when we started looking at what they really meant by the alternative structure.
How did we get here? In other words, we had a vote, and then there was a petition to revote, and that failed for lack of signers. And so someone must have put this before the town again. In other words, was it the school board, or was it the selectmen, or who was it? And if it was you, as a select board, why aren't you willing to give us your opinion of why you did it?
So yes, it was the school board, even though you might have heard strange rumors that the select board has something to do with it, but it's the school board that, there are two avenues to calling another vote. One is to petition the town, the other one is that the school board can actually call this. And this kind of came up through discussions in our meetings where, just through the discussions of what was going on in Waterville, because that comes up in our, came up in our meetings, our own meetings here, just hearing what was going on in the district. And between that and understanding more about how our understanding of the law has evolved and how the implementation of the law is involved. I forgot to mention, I just have, so that, as an aside, the alternative structure, to apply for that, you need to adhere to some rules that the State Board of Education comes up with. And you're the freshly revised rules that they made last week. They came out last week, and it's basically 15 pages of all the categories of things that you need to provide for the last data for the last 5 years, to the agency of education, making a case why you want your structure. So it's things like this, the evolving of these rules. We didn't have these last year. We didn't know what they were going to ask for. We now understand more of what they're looking for, what the implications of both a yes or no vote means. And so just from our discussions, it kind of came up that we would rather come back to the voters and say, okay, well, now this is what we know now. It's 9 months later. We'd rather do this and have everyone kind of wonder like you are, why are we doing this? Is this a waste of time? I'm just going to cast my vote. You cast your vote, and then whatever the outcome is, say it's a no vote. But we would have given you the opportunity at least to know what was the latest information. Or, because say 6 months from now we find something out that impacts our budget greatly, say next year, or we find our tax rate going up next year because of some reason, and that maybe it wouldn't have with, and I guess you saw the numbers that Maryland had, but maybe it's on some unforeseen thing where we lose some kind of funding stream or something. We don't, and then we find out at that point that, or we knew back in March or February that that if we had voted to get into the district, we wouldn't have lost that money. Well, if we understood all this new information and didn't bring it back to the voters, it really was not, we didn't think it was a very transparent way to be running the school. We wanted to give everybody what we knew, let you make another informed decision about it, and then go from there. We figured that was the best route, to just keep it out in the open. Like I said, I mean, there's pros and cons. You probably have different, I mean, I have a 5th grader here in the school, so, I know, question earlier asking how does this impact the students positively? I mean, that's a big deal, and that's an important question that we are not, very few times does that question come up in this discussion, unfortunately. And the students are absolutely the ones who are going to be impacted, right? So yes, it impacts the taxpayers and the property owners and the teachers, the administrators, impacts us as board members. But certainly it's, the students will, no matter what, will be impacted either way. And unfortunately, and this statewide, this discussion statewide has not focused enough, I think, on the students and trying to find what's the best thing, or at least can you, vocalize what's best for the students? It's a difficult thing to do. And I know, equity and equality is brought up a lot. That's a difficult thing to define, and I don't think there's any single or easy definition to equality of education, which is what makes this so much more of a difficult decision. But like I said, you may or may not have different priorities than I do. And so, I could say to you, I want what's best for my son in here, but it's not necessarily what might be best for you. What's best for my son?
Mark, we have a question.
We have a question we'll go to.
You can answer that, Mark. If you want first. I was going to say, you can answer that first. No. I just wanted to comment too, again, a year ago, the probability, our understanding of the probability of us being eligible for an alternate structure is much different than our understanding is today. I mean, you see the 15-page, or Mark had mentioned the 15-page rules on what's an alternate structure. I know at a recent meeting, we had representation for the Vermont School Boards Association, a legal representation. She outlined it better than what I'll be able to do here, but the reality is those alternate structures really aren't too viable for places that fit in the preferred structure. Cambridge fits in the preferred structure. So the probability of Cambridge ending up with the Lemoyle North Supervisory Union a year from now, 2 years from now, when the Secretary of Education makes her recommendation and the state decides, is, in my mind, significantly higher probability than it was even a year ago. So in terms of maybe why the board brought this forward is, I think we're all seeing that at this point too. The probability is there that Cambridge will remain with Lemoyle North Supervisory Union, very high probability, and this is your last opportunity virtually to get, yeah, it's pretty much a last opportunity because you have to decide by April to get any sort of incentives, to get any sort of benefits. So if it's looking like it's going to happen anyway, much more so than it did a year ago for me, maybe I can't really speak to the board, but I think that's probably something that entered into their mind, then you might as well get why wouldn't you get the incentives for it? So, maybe that's something that, right or wrong, that is a factor. I'm also, I can't tell you how blown away I am by the idea that you've built into the budget elementary foreign language, that we've got other opportunities for enrichment throughout our elementaries that not all elementaries had before, and that they're building those things into the budget. So I do think that there's some differences for kids that have occurred. Oh. But there's also a board member that wants to comment on that.
I can wait my turn.
Okay.
So I was just going to piggyback on Bridget's, and Mark sort of touched on it. There's a lot of money issues, which is great. We all like to save money. But other than foreign languages and some enrichment stuff, I haven't been seeing a lot of positive stuff on why we should vote for this for our kids. What are the kids going to benefit out of this?
Well, I sit here and I wonder too, what's going to change for your kids? And I mean,
Well,
I think you're going to have the same principle.
So
Maybe I'm wrong.
One
and,
specific question is gifted and talented. There's lots of rumors going on. What's going to happen to our gifted and talented?
Do you want to answer that one?
At this point, there's no plans to change curriculum at this campus. And I think what it does is it gives an opportunity, unifying gives an opportunity for best practices to be distributed evenly across all the campuses. There may be best practices happening at Eden under some particular initiative that can then be shared across all campuses. So it gives an opportunity for all the boats rise when the tide goes up, sort of thing.
And I know even last year, I talked about being in a single district before, where I witnessed that very thing. You would not have an elementary school in a single district that had a program for very long before you had all of them having a decent program of that, whether it was a foreign language or a music program or an enrichment program. There might be a year or so that they do it as a like a beta test of something, like maybe let's think of Orchard School and the no homework policy, something like that. They're looking at that across all their schools now, but they wanted one school to start it. That's usually the type of thing I've seen in single districts where they try out a program and it does, you know, would you say all the boats rise
All the boats rise when the tide comes in. Or
if it's a good program, I've seen much more often where it gets replicated than when you don't cut out your good programs, typically. Jan had.
Jan, go ahead. And I have a question online.
Jerry has a question too.
I agree wholeheartedly with everything that Mark has said and what Marilyn has said. And for me as a board member, the main reason that we decided to bring this back to the community can be summed up in one word: proactive. Things are changing, and we know more today than we knew a year ago, and it's not looking so good to being able to go on our own as an alternative structure. We don't know that for sure. Unfortunately, our crystal ball hasn't been working very well lately. But we didn't want to find ourselves in a situation where a couple years down the road, we're in this place where we really don't want to be, and the taxpayers are looking at us and saying, why didn't you tell us this might happen? So basically, we're trying to be proactive and lay out all of the facts and let the voters make the decision. We don't want to back you into a situation where 2-3 years down the road, you look to us and say, you should have told us.
If the board won't give us their opinion, would the principal give their opinion as far as the educational benefits of this plan?
This is obviously a difficult subject for probably just about everybody in this room to think about. And I wish I had a crystal ball, and I don't. I've been looking and looking, and if you see one out there, I'd be happy to purchase it from you. I care very deeply about the children of this community. 16 years I've worked here. Proud to say I'm your leader of your school, and I'm so blessed to have such wonderful people here every day caring for your children and such a supportive community. And so all that said, I'll speak for myself, when I think about having other communities representing what I hold so dear, what I know you hold so dear, I'm concerned. I don't know what's going to happen. This community has supported certain programs over and over because you feel they're important, and I don't know if a larger set of people from other communities will share that sentiment. I wish I did know. To me, it's a sad day for this school. However, I have hope that if in the end this is what has to happen, that the folks at the table will look at what is an amazing example of what an elementary school can be, and will want to replicate what they see, and will be willing to pay for it. And I think you've done this in a way that have kept your costs down. Certainly none of us like to pay taxes, but you've managed to run all of your municipalities in a really shrewd, smart way. And I hope that the other communities of Lamoille North will want to learn from the way you've managed things over the years. As for the educational benefits, I really can't say. Have we talked about foreign language in the past? Would that be a nice thing to have at our school? Sure. Absolutely, but it's also complicated. And I've done my research about bringing foreign language to Cambridge Elementary School, and in the end, we opted not to move it forward, but it was really for financial reasons that we felt that we needed to just kind of hold on to what we had. So I don't know. I don't know what the educational benefits would be. I guess I can't stretch my mind to that place. So that's my opinion.
I think this gentleman.
My name is Doug Masson, and I've been in the community 25 years. I would personally like to thank the board for bringing this back to the table. I didn't have any insight the last vote, but I voted yes, and I was totally surprised the next morning to find out that the vote was no. I respect Cambridge. I have grandchildren in the school, and it's a very important part of our community, and the folks here have done an excellent job. I think one thing at the last vote that concerned a lot of folks was fear of the unknown of what may take place. And I've had the opportunity to visit the high school and the tech center, and our children get blended in at grades 7 and 8 up there. And if a vote yes is any indication of what takes place up at the high school, I think this, for me, is another yes vote. And I thank the board. Thank you.
This gentleman here, and then I think.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, essentially is regardless of, I guess what you could say, whether the vote on town meeting, regardless of what the vote's going to be on town meeting day, is that the merger's going to happen, whether we want it to happen or not, essentially. So whether basically voting yes now just gives us, what, an 8% reduction or as a gradually increasing reduction on our property taxes for a few years. But there is no possibility, you think, of Cambridge being able to exist. I guess from what I've seen of the budget meetings, that the numbers are stable. We're not like Waterville or the other schools, which getting to that point, I think the reason Waterville voted in the affirmative is that they realized they were going to lose $400,000 in funding. So, well, of course they're going to vote yes for that, because if they don't, they're going to lose their school. So Cambridge isn't in that position where we are much more financially stable. We're much larger than both Waterville and Belvedere. And if you look at our test scores, if that's been borne out, we have been relatively very stable in those scores and have been on the higher end of it in most cases, or at the very least, certainly not lacking significantly in any real regard. So the question is if what, other than just a pure dollars and cents thing, there's no really incentive really to vote for it. We're just going to get shoved into it one way or another.
Well, I think you started with that, it looks like we're going to be merged anyway. Yes, that is what Act 46 does. We are going to be merged at some point.
Well,
No, that's not true.
so there's, yeah,
Very minute. My own personal opinion is there's no possibility that Cambridge could be considered for an alternative because they fit perfectly the preferred.
Even
It's
given
my
the fact
personal
that we
opinion.
are financially stable.
That doesn't have anything to do with it.
Test scores are stable.
so yeah, so the question is how could Cambridge ever exist on its own as a district? Let me just, pulling out the rules here, the state actually, to apply for an alternative structure, so the only way we could remain a single district of our own would be what they call a side-by-side district or whatever, and even then, that's stretching, I think, the definition of side-by-side district with Lamoille North. When you apply for an alternative structure, the Act 46, there are 5 goals that they wanted to achieve with this law, and I can read you what they are. The first is to provide substantial equity in the quality and variety of educational opportunities statewide. So they're seeking quality and variety of opportunities in education. Lead students to achieve or exceed the state's education quality standards adopted by the AOE, which, if you look at our SBAC scores, our the NECAP scores in your past, the science score, we do fare very well compared to both the district and the state. We're above the average for the state, and we tend to run on the high side for the district also in those scores. The third is to maximize operational efficiency, so increase flexibility to manage, share, and transfer resources with a goal of increasing the district level ratio of students to full-time equivalent staff. So being a larger school, it drives down our cost per pupil, equalized per pupil, and a larger school allows us to have a higher, basically, student to adult ratio in the school. Those are two numbers that the state really wants to see. The state wants to see the student to adult ratio go up. Trying to remember, the average in the state right now is around 9, I want to say, student to teacher, and around 4.6 student to adult. So imagine some schools where the average class size is 9 kids with a teacher. And here we're looking at, I think we're in the upper teens, I think, for average. So this, in that particular case, we kind of fare well. The fourth one is promote transparency and accountability. I think that is through, that's your transparency, I think, and accountability. This is a tricky one because I'm not sure, and I've seen debate about this in people down at the legislature talking about whether that's transparency to the state and accountability to the state, or transparency and accountability to your local taxpayers. Either way, I think that's either way. Whether you're merged or not, I think in general in Lamoille North we do a reasonably good job at trying to be transparent and accountable. And the fifth goal was to deliver at a cost that parents, voters, and taxpayers value. And obviously we were able to get budgets passed each year, and this year we were able to get the taxes to go down with the CLA. And so those are the 5 goals, and you could make a case that it's, as Marilyn said, it's an uphill climb, but they're the 5 goals, and there's a lot. There isn't any one of those 5 that I would look at that says, boy, we couldn't make a case for that. We could make a great case to stay as, I think, as a single district, but it would still might not get, they still may look at it and say, it doesn't matter, you're going in Lamoille North. That's the thing we don't know. There is I don't want to say it's a foregone conclusion that we'll be merged eventually, but that's what the state wants to have done, and it's a very hard thing. It's not that I think I would reasonably speak for the whole board here that we're willing to do the work to apply for an alternative structure. It's not that that's, we're willing to do it if that's what the voters want. But it's not quite as dire as that you have no say. You have a vote, but it really means nothing. It's not quite that dire, but it's the chances are not as good that we'd be able to create our own district. But there is a path. I'll put it that way. I do have one quick. Heather Shepard sent a thing online. She's been waiting very patiently watching online. Thank you, Heather. A question, and it was what's the process for nominating elected board members to the, I assume the MUSD board, to the new single district board? And I just wanted to touch on that for her. I think it was Article 11 in the articles. Basically says it's like we did the first time around. Everybody in each town that wants to run, you would basically have to go out and get a petition, you file with the clerk of the town you're in, and get a petition and get, I guess, at least 30 voters or 1% of the legal voters, whichever is less, in writing to get on the ballot and to run each year. And I think I don't think this year because it hasn't officially started up, we haven't really started our terms up there yet. But I think next year there will be positions that show up in town meeting where you'd vote Australian ballot for, same as we did last year, for board members up there. So that is the process for that, Heather. Anyway, you're welcome.
Just a further comment on that, on the whole history of this. Act 46, initially they said, well, they wanted to consolidate all these small districts around the state into unified districts of at least 900 folks. Well, Lamoille North had more than twice that. And we had a good system of 6 towns with 5 pre-K through 6 schools, and everybody going to the middle school, high school, and the available tech center. pretty well-oiled, well-functioning system as it was. But this morphed into more than that it was not just the small districts that were going after, it was essentially everything. And it was pretty clear that the heavy hand of the state was going to come down on this. I was on the study committee setting up the rules on this and tried real hard to put in some protections, such as reference has been made to earlier, that in order to change, say, the existing use policies of the thing, what's required and how Cambridge would be fully protected under that. Whether Act 46 was a good idea or not, and I think we have varying opinions on that, it's not going to change. It's here. And the handwriting is pretty well on the wall now that we've got 5 out of the 6 towns approving it, everything in place. It is going to happen. The board was certainly well advised to put this on the ballot this time around because there is still the possibility now of getting at least the remaining years of the tax advantages. And if Cambridge were to decide 2 months from now that, oh no, we really want to come into it, that train would have left the station. If the yes decision doesn't come in before April, 12th, someday in April, then it involves petitioning the other towns to get permission, petitioning the State Board of Education. Even though they want us in, the hurdles would be a lot higher there. So essentially, if we don't do this, yes, Cambridge will not remain on its own. The Secretary of Education will, in all probability, put us right into the Moyle North. At that point, will be the unified school district because it won't be modified anymore because everybody will be in it. But in actuality, we already have 1 foot in it because we're members of the former District 18. We send our kids there. So the elected representatives from Cambridge to that board will exist and we'll debate all this stuff, just won't be able to vote on elementary matters as this new board, as we're already doing, and as it takes over in July. So it exists. We will eventually be put someplace, and hopefully when that time came, it would be the logical choice to leave us in the Moyle district rather than putting us down with Mount Mansfield or BFA or something else, which would be a possibility, but would be a ludicrous choice. So basically, kind of like The Godfather, the state gave us an offer we can't refuse. And it did put a few carrots there to make it a little more palatable. But if we don't do it, the big stick is coming down anyway. That's where we're going to wind up. So essentially, it doesn't really make any sense not to say yes at this point because we're going to be there anyway. And the way is greased a little bit if we do it now. And you can't blame one political party or the other. Everybody was on board with this. You see it as a failure of the legislature, whatever. That is the current reality, and we just have to deal with it.
Any other questions? Yeah, I think Bill hit something on that. A lot of people wanted to wait till after the election this year to see if someone's going to, if there was a new administration, that was going to happen, was going to get repealed. But they don't realize that everybody in Montpelier is looking at this Pikus report that says that the only way to cut education spending in the state is through all sorts of reductions. So none of them want this to go away, Act 46. So yes, it will stay.
I'm just curious. So a year ago, when Cambridge voted no, what the reasons were why we voted no, and also if we were to, this kind of goes with Bridget's question, the sort of other side of it, if what would be the downside for students at this school if it was a no vote again?
Why, you're asking why it was that people voted no last time around to start with? I heard a variety, I think all of us heard a variety of reasons why people were concerned. I mean, and you've heard some of them tonight. Some of them are still out there. The facilities, the buses, the programming, the debt, taking on debt. Trying to think of some of the other ones. I mean, those are big ones, and they're real concerns for people. And I think, we have a slightly more nuanced understanding of that now, of some of those things. Well, we could, so one of the concerns, like with the facilities, we can understand a little more how the facilities will, how we'll control facilities or how they won't change the use of them. And yes, the ownership changes, the control of them doesn't change quite like we thought. But some of them are still out there. You know, the idea of the buses, you know, that's an asset that, you know, is now there. As far as now, the implications to the students, if there's a no vote, I mean, like Mary said, I don't think I couldn't, I don't know if anyone can, it's hard to really come up with a projection of what could happen. Yes, the people worried about the enrichment that happens in all the classes here, that I guess is a discussion and a debate for, you know, when you're creating a budget in a larger board setting. I don't know what would happen.
A real quick point on that, which something has changed. I think folks voted against this, voting against the whole concept of the unified school district. But there was a threshold of at least 4 towns did vote for it, which they did, then it was created. So I don't think the vote was so much to keep Cambridge out of an entity which they knew was going to exist, but trying to keep the whole entity from being created. Well, it was created. And folks didn't really anticipate the situation of just meeting the minimum threshold and doing it with towns with some very low populations, whereas Cambridge, with what, 26% of the folks up at the high school, so on, you know, a pretty good percentage of the union out of it, but nevertheless, this modified unified school district was created. So that situation has changed a lot. And now, especially since Waterville has come in, it's really changed. And just a point of clarification on the buses, that's not going to change. Cambridge no longer controls the buses anyway. The state had mandated that be centralized with the supervisory union. So that's going to happen, and it has happened in any event. But Maryland has been able to manage things while she was still business manager and continuing now, that basically in operation nothing is changing, even though it's not under Cambridge's control anymore.
Yep. And Deb has continued too as business manager. And we have time for one more question.
Yeah, let's take, we probably ought to wrap it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sir?
Do you have a question?
So,
Yeah.
okay.
There you go.
And just one other cost, I think, is also important to consider, you know, regardless of how you vote. I honestly I'm unsure really of how I would vote on this, but one important thing to really consider is also the civic cost, as I worry about, is that it seems to be, I think you've seen a slow march just in Vermont in general, of a slow kind of creeping centralization of more and more things that used to be done by the towns. And that's for a variety of reasons. I'm not going to sit here and say we should or shouldn't do that. You know, I'm not a crazy hyper-local person. You know, there's costs and benefits associated with it. But the thing that concerns me is the reason why people have town meeting day, why we have these traditions, is because you can actually vote and act in a substantive and meaningful way on issues that directly impact you and your community. I think the fact that there's people sitting in this room is a good testament to that. The more and more that you take that away, I worry to see more gradual, and I think you're seeing this in a lot of other towns, is a gradual erosion of that civic culture. And eventually, maybe you won't have town meeting day anymore. And maybe we could have that argument whether we should or we shouldn't, and that's, you know, I think there's arguments to be had about that. But we have to consider that too, that there are other costs outside of just education and stuff, and I do worry that whether or not we would have such a good, a very, qualified board such as yourself sitting there now, if more and more of your ability to make decisions over, in a meaningful way over the school gets further taken away. I mean, what's to say 10 years from now, it's the State Board of Education essentially saying, is deciding unified education policy in the state of Vermont. I mean, they are to a certain extent, but
Is there a question in all
it's
that?
just a general, I guess you could say, closing statement, and that's just kind of how I'd leave that.
Marilyn, did you want to mention?
Okay, well, there are I don't know, was there something that you wanted to talk about, the debt service, wanted to make a point that Cambridge's debt service will be shared amongst everyone also. It's not just you absorbing like something like a Hyde Park. Obviously, Cambridge is shared throughout also.
We're still paying off our latest edition.
Yeah. Pardon me? No, okay, so I know earlier, this question has to do with the bonded debt. Bonded debt, as I mentioned before, since 1997, the first year of Act 60, we have a statewide education tax. Not many communities, very few, raise enough money to support their bonds or their education costs. It's really shared throughout the entire state. It's an education statewide tax, and we share in all that. There is a higher percentage for the local member towns that pick up any sort of bonded debt, whether that's Hyde Park's bonded debt or Cambridge's existing bonded debt, which is pretty good too. So all that is shared. I mean, basically, the education formula that we have to fund our schools is something that is shared amongst all our towns. And the focus of cost, which is why you're seeing it more and more at Montpelier being a strong focus, is because it is statewide. And they've had, people mention, it doesn't matter what political party, every entity at the State House, regardless of party affiliation, is concerned about the cost for education. So yes, that was one of the driving forces of this. I also believe that there was a driving force on equity and educational quality because there were some real inequalities throughout the state that this was meant to address. And while we've been fortunate enough to have outstanding schools, of which Cambridge is certainly one of them, that wasn't necessarily the case all over. So I think there's more than financial reasons to do this, but I know today, more than a year ago, 9 months ago, to me the writing's more on the wall today than it ever was. That Act 46 is here to stay, and you have an opportunity to take advantage of some incentives that they have available to you now that won't be there a month from now. And to me, that pretty much sums it up. Oh, did you hear?
No, actually, you answered it.
Was that?
But does the board know, maybe you don't know, but does the board know the comparisons of Cambridge indebtedness compared to, say, Hyde Park, Waterville? Yeah, because is there a chance that we could be saving more knowing that our indebtedness is going to be shared countywide?
I don't think I have a slide for that, but I mean, you do have a number of our towns that don't have any bonded debt or are going to retire them in the very near future. So, you know, both Belvedere and Waterville are either retired or about to retire them in a year. There are different bonds at the, even the high school campus that will retire. Eden had a retired bonded debt. They just picked up a small one just last year of, I forget if it was a 1.5 million or so. But overall, the way everything's structured, the bonded debt strategy is one that will continue to go down in the upcoming years, not up as a single district.
So I can tell you we have, principal and interest for next year is $400,000 proposed in the budget for our debt service. We don't have right in front of us the remaining total left, but you know, 2 years ago we had $445,000 in the budget, and it's going, you know, slightly down. So you can kind of do the math. It's going to take a few more years to get out from under it, but, yeah, I can't remember where we're at. Yeah, it's a pretty good size. Yep. Do we have, oh, go ahead. Do you have the?
No, I don't, I was going to see if I could just pick up the Act 40 for the Hyde Park.
Having been on a school board, it's usually, you know, the bonded debt is not as important. If you look in the pie chart, it's really small. It's the cost of running these schools that really drives it. It's not the bonded debt. I mean, that can be spread out so much. It's just, you know, it's important, but I don't know if it's all that important.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Marilyn and Deb, the way the Hyde Park debt, just for clarification, was structured was its interest payments to start with until the high school is paid, until the middle school upgrade is paid, and then I think it's, right?
Yeah, we had a great opportunity because interest rates are so low right now. They're at record lows. I mean, last year was at a record low, and they're still low today. So the way we structured the bonded debt of Hyde Park was it's interest only for the first 5 years until the bonded debt at the high school totally retires. And then that's when principal payment comes in for Hyde Park. So even if all of us join in together, our bonded debt continues to go down pretty significantly. I think when Hyde Park's principal comes into play, I think it's still, the overall total debt of all the districts still is going to drop by like $300,000 to $400,000. So we,
Servicing, the debt servicing.
right. Yes, not the bonded debt itself, but the service of it, what you have to pay every year is going to drop significantly. We purposely did that. And you have an opportunity now, you would be, if, I mean, the union board, all the schools in Lamoille Nurse Supervisory Union and the Muse at that point, if all of us came together as the Muse, you'd have some of the best facilities in the state. All our schools would be really top-notch, and that's an investment too. You have an obligation to keep up your buildings, and you'd be in good shape. So I don't know if there's any further computer questions or anything, anyway? Not, okay. So at this point, it's past 8:30. I'd like to thank everyone, and please remember to go out and vote on Tuesday. Thank you.